What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Eclectic Collector channel. So, today I want to talk about a series that I've had in my collection for almost 2 years. I have the first 5 volumes of the Omni version of the series. If I'm not mistaken, I think there was like a single editions version of it that existed at one point in time that is completely sold out, or like rather out of print. But this is something that I've known about, like I said, for a really long time. I dated a girl when I was like a teenager that had told me about this series, and she was reading it. And when I saw that these Omni editions of this series were available, I decided to check them out. And at some point in time, pretty much like right when I picked them up, I did a video, kind of showing off the copies of it that I had. And I never really got around to, making a video about Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service. But I figured, you know what, 2024 is the year when I'm going to start making videos about a lot of stuff in my collection that I've had for a long time that I never made a video about. And I think this is going to be like the flagship video, that kicks off that whole thing, getting into a lot of older series. And I'm going to start doing more of that. I even have like a whole video type that I'm going to be doing coming up for older series called From the Vault. So I'm going to be talking about series that came out before a certain time, and I'll talk more about that once I get that actually going. But let's kick this thing off. I got a lot I want to say about this series. Finally read Volume 1. Absolutely loved it. Been reading it for a really long time, on and off between reading other things, for videos and whatnot. But I finally just decided to stop reading other things. So let's do it. The underrated brilliance of the Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service. The Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service manga, written by Eiji Otsuka and drawn by Hosui Yamazaki, is one of the most offbeat things I've ever read. And this video is just covering Volume 1, since it is the only volume I've read so far. Still, I was sold on this story almost as soon as I delved in. The Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service is one of those stories that a lot of people know about, but no one ever talks about. The writing is solid, the art is as well. When you combine two creators who share a vision, what you get is something that feels like care, love, and dedication went into it. Despite how dark or brutal the story may be, someone took time to craft it and to then share their macabre vision with the world. What this tale is about is there is a group of college students that team up to solve the mysteries of how people died. Each person plays a part, from a guy using a dowsing rod to a guy with psychic powers who can communicate with the dead. There is a computers expert as well who can dig up dirt on anything. There are 2 other characters as well, one of whom is an embalmer and the other has an alien sock puppet on his hand. The 5 of them together find dead bodies and communicate with them. They search for clues as to how the deceased came to be that way, if they were killed or died of natural causes. Then they take the corpse to the place where it wants to go, so the soul within it can move on. This story from the outset is outrageous. Everything about it is so unique and bizarre, but none of it ever feels far-fetched. The world has its rules and the characters within play by them. Even though it does get a bit outlandish, it doesn't ever feel like it's stepping outside the boundaries of what is possible. This was an idea initially by Eiji Otsuka, who is also the writer behind MPD Psycho, with Shou Tajima drawing it. This time around, he'd enlisted the help of Hosui Yamazaki, known for the psychological horror manga Mail. The world these two brought about is as magnificent as it is brutal, and I want to spend this video's runtime elaborating on just how incredible this series is. The Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service is one of those early 2000s gems that has definitely had a cult following for at least 2 decades. I remember being a teenager and dating a girl who was a fan of it. I wasn't personally yet into manga at the time, but I did consume an exorbitant amount of anime through both buying DVDs and watching fan translations on shady sites. This was 2007 I'm talking about, which was a wholly different era for being a fan of anime than it is now, with options on how and where to watch legally not being as widely available then as they are now. This is a story that was edgy at a time when edginess was at its peak, from Elfen Lied to Gantz and Helsing. Only I think Kurosagi mixed in humor a lot more than other series that came out around this time period. It does kind of show its age in that no one knows how a computer works. There is only one character with any computer experience, and that is Sasaki. Even their appearances speak to a bygone era, like the film Fallen Angels. So one of my favorite things about reading Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service is getting to hang out with the leads. Like the characters in this story, dude, are so much fun to just hang out with. Like I grew up. I'm assuming a lot of the people that watch this channel are, close to my age. And I'm assuming like a lot of you also kind of grew up, like in the like mid 2000s, like early to mid 2000s. And one thing you'll notice, like if you've read the story yourself, like it feels so mid 2000s, dude. The way the characters look, the way everybody dresses and whatnot feels like so aesthetically, that period of time where like there was still some semblance of, I guess, like individuality, and now it feels like more of like there's less, sorts of originality in a sense where like even like in Japan, like if you look at like Shinjuku and like whatnot, like in different parts, there was like a whole really unique, weird style that permeated, and it was the same in like the US and whatnot. There was like a whole style, and if you watch like TV shows, from the early to mid 2000s, like it had a style, and the way that these characters look really fit, a certain sort of aesthetic, and that coupled with, how they speak to each other, the way they act, like I really came to care about these people. And there's a certain part that I won't get into just in case, there's people watching this video that haven't read the manga, but there is a certain part where I was pretty certain one of the characters was going to be essentially killed, hit by a train, and I won't say who or under what the circumstances are that this happens, but it legitimately, like, I felt it like my heart, like was like, I felt it in my heart, like my heart was like gonna start pounding in my chest, I was like, no, please don't do this, because like I read a lot of manga, where like bad things happen. I read a lot of manga, dude, where bad things happen to the characters, that you come to care about, and it definitely scared the hell out of me, reading it. And that's kind of like the moment where I realized that I had become attached to these characters. The characters we follow are Karatsu, who is essentially a spirit medium, who has like a priest or shrine maiden spirit that helps him commune with the dead. He's also a Buddhist monk in training and in his 4th year of college. Yata is a sort of psychic with future premonitions that he doesn't even follow. He has a sock puppet that is supposed to be an alien named Corellis or something like that he wears on his hand and is the source spouting the premonitions that come true within moments of being uttered. Interestingly enough, there is a real neurological disorder called alien hand syndrome, where a person's hand acts outside of their own control. Yata's hand puppet acting on its own and being a supposed alien is a play on this. Sasaki is basically the brains of the operation, the Nick Fury of the group, building a team of oddballs and misfits. She's also their comms expert, super intelligent. She quickly became one of my favorite characters, Her design and carefree attitude are great. Despite assembling this group of people, she doesn't believe in the paranormal. Numata, or as I like to refer to him, cool sunglasses guy, he uses a dowsing rod to detect dead bodies which Karatsu can then talk to. Numata and Karatsu were like the driving force in Volume 1, since their abilities basically work in tandem. Numata just reminds me of a mid 2000s cool guy with the windbreaker jacket, sunglasses, and slick back hair. Makino is kind of like a lolly character, but not as over the top as like ReZero or Mushoku Tensei. She doesn't have a lot of screen time in Volume 1 from what I can remember. She might have more to do in the second Omni. She's an embalmer who learned the tricks of the trade overseas and brought them home to Japan. As solid as the writing is, the art by Hosui Yamazaki is just as incredible. Yamazaki sensei has other works under his belt as well, including Mail, which I'd mentioned previously. It has an out-of-print English translation through Dark Horse, just like Kurosagi. I'd love to get my hands on a physical copy of Mail. The cover art is super similar to Kurosagi, and I think they'd look great on a shelf side by side. Kurosagi was originally available in singles. Besides, I'm a huge fan of omnibuses and usually go for those instead of singles. I feel like you get more bang for your buck. These omnibus editions even include glossaries at the end of each volume, with all the words and sound effects used throughout the specific chapters contained within. Having not ever held or read these singles, I'm unaware if the glossaries were also available in them. If you own the singles and can answer the question, I'd love to know. Regardless of how you consume it, all that matters is that you do. So this is a story that is like, essentially replete with just the most odd sorts of situations, with the characters and the things they encounter, the people they run into. And it feels like I mentioned before, when I did my other break, about it feeling like really unique to the time period in which, it existed. And I definitely feel like this is a story that maybe would not exist, today. Like it's maybe not something that would be written by a mangaka in this day and age. But given, when it was written and by, the people who had their hands on it and whatnot, I feel like it stands as a reminder, I guess, if you will, for the time in which it took place and the certain, bits and pieces that happen within the story, the certain arcs and whatnot. Some of them are really strange. Like one of the arcs is about, well, it's not so much about this one character, but there is a character that appears in one of the arcs who was like a medical student or something at one point in time, and he leaves, or a clip is left inside of a patient when there's a surgery being performed, and this dude takes it upon himself to find out where this patient lives, go to his house, and basically like kill this person, like because why not? He just goes to his house, murders him to try to get the clip back, only to find out the clip isn't in this guy, you know what I mean? So he basically like followed this man home after the surgery and killed him to get the clip back so that, the hospital that he worked for wouldn't be sued for malpractice. Because, that just makes like perfect sense, obviously. I don't know, dude. I don't know, but I think that's just like a part of what I was saying, that stands to the brilliance of the Kurosagi corpse delivery service, that like this mangaka like had this idea for this character that is that much of a raging lunatic that he would follow a man home just to get a clip out of him to save the hospital that he works for from, getting sued for malpractice, bro. That is just top-notch dedication right there. These story arcs are strange, but fit the odd narrative perfectly. One story follows a killer who commits murder by predicting the probability of change in the weather. In another arc, a serial killer targets women by offering them a haircut and then chops them up. There is no real central antagonist in this series. Each arc presents its own challenges the crew has to overcome. Some of them are of real danger to the team members, like one about a song that drives people to unalive themselves, and another is about a death game. One of my favorite arcs kicks off with a girl bringing a cat back to life, only for it to attack a random stranger. Reminded me of Pet Sematary, which was probably the inspiration for the scene. A cool touch by Otsuka-sensei is the chapter titles are song names by Japanese musicians. That is something that definitely gives the story personality. I remember Cowboy Bebop doing that as well, naming episodes after popular classic rock songs. Eiji Otsuka also made MPD Psycho, but with a different mangaka drawing it, Shou Tajima. I know I'd mentioned this already in this video, but it's worth mentioning again. I wouldn't be surprised if that story were in part inspiration for M. Night Shyamalan's Split. Both feature a lead with a ridiculous amount of personalities, though MPD Psycho came out way before Split. I can also see Usamaru Furuya's Suicide Club having been an inspiration for The Happening. Not saying this is the case for either of those, but Shyamalan has admitted to being a fan of anime, so who is to say he hasn't seen Suicide Club or read MPD Psycho, or even seen Takashi Miike's film adaptation of MPD Psycho. Funny enough, there is a part of Kurosagi that is almost exactly like Brandon Cronenberg's Infinity Pool. In Infinity Pool, if you kill someone and can afford it, there is a clone made of you who the grieving family of the deceased can kill. It's the law of the land. In Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service, the previously mentioned girl who revived the cat also brings the dead who have committed murder back to life. They are killed by the state as a capital punishment. Their corpses are then reanimated so they can be killed again by the family of the person the former prisoner had murdered. The act is referred to in the manga as Fugu Daiten. According to the liner notes, Fugu Daiten refers to having to take revenge on another, even if it means one's own death. I say it's kind of similar to Infinity Pool, but I'm not saying it's the exact same, or that Brandon Cronenberg ripped the idea off. Coincidences are inevitable. After all, this is just a random arc in a story replete with random arcs. Some of the plot lines the story uses and throws away could easily be whole storylines for other series. I think that is the brilliance of Otsuka Sensei's writing. He can come up with these wild ideas, use them in a handful of chapters, and then move on to the next thing. What I enjoyed in this arc involved a clip being left inside of a patient after a car crash. A young intern takes it upon himself to go retrieve the clip from the man it was left inside to avoid a medical malpractice lawsuit. And it's kind of funny like that this coincides with the releasing of the 6th Omni of Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service. So I thought it would be cool, like to finally knock out this first volume that I started reading forever ago. And yeah, I've been reading this thing for like over a year on and off, and I'm pretty sure it's had a bookmark in it. It's gone now because I finished reading it, but like it had a bookmark in it for the longest time. It had a bookmark in it when I did my tour video, my last one, and probably had a bookmark in it when I did the tour video before that. Just to kind of illustrate how long I've had this thing on the shelf. The arc that this takes place in introduces a whole set of characters to tell this story, all playing their parts to bring it to the big reveal that I won't mention any more of. I also won't say who specifically was involved. It was too outrageous not to mention the other part. It reminded me of the crocodile episode of Black Mirror where one crime is covered up with another even worse crime, and it just keeps escalating from there. What it also reminded me of is an episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Not any specific episode, just the way they're framed. There is a situation introduced, the players involved, and the elements that will shape the story that episode is telling. The best example I can think of off the top of my head is the episode where Mac has sex with Dee and Dennis's mom. One awful thing just stacks on top of another, and it ends with the waitress having sex with Frank. That show did things you probably couldn't get away with today, but it helps to illustrate the point I'm trying to make. An absurd situation can work if it is crafted well, and this series is full of absurd situations, not just limited to the arc about raising the dead. There is a roadmap painted for sort of death game participants, leading them to potential victims in another arc. I won't get into it though to leave some of this manga's unique events up to the readers to unearth for themselves. What I will say is, after a while of reading Kurosagi, I found that I quite enjoyed hanging out with these characters. Their personality clashes and the way they interact with one another. They go from being complete strangers in the opening of the story to close friends by the end of it, though their arrangement is obviously a business one, and business isn't always necessarily booming. What's funny is they do eventually start to take on more of a cult status for the work they do. A former cop turned social welfare guy asks them if they get paid for their work, to which they reply, sometimes, but mostly it's like they're doing it pro bono. Their payments come from people who are already dead, after all. I'm honestly ashamed that it took me this long to finally get around to finishing the first volume. Can't wait to see where the rest of it will go. With the Volume 6 Omnibus officially available for pre-order, there is no question that now is the perfect time to take this beautifully deranged ride.
Yo, it's himself, the Shadowrunners clique, aka Sleep Allah. Take you on a mental and live for one day, y'all. Sheets, y'all. Guns, y'all. Yo, who got the guns, who got the coke? Hustling them through like big punch cholesterol before he croak. Rest in peace, but I bless in peace and live to one day lean shoots. Rap over beats and tell wild stories, the mythology mystery. Choke on your own misery, fuck them, we're the wild bunch. Yo, I asked him if this bike could punch. This shit made me lose my lunch. Bro grabbed the rocket, I said chill before he cocked it.